WhatsApp Pro series. It's your boy Osas, and in today's episode, we are going to continue with our chat reaction functionality. Over the last couple of episodes, we built out the components for this custom interactive animation. When we long press on a message, we get this beautiful reaction picker view and this custom context menu. In today's episode, I want us to add the backend logic that is going to allow us, when we select one of these individual emojis, to actually add that emoji to our backend so that our chat partners and the people in our chat room can actually see which messages we have reacted to. So the bulk of today's work is just going to be focusing on writing that Firebase query. And let us get right into it and jump into our reaction picker view. As you saw just now in the demo right here, when we select one of these individual emojis, we're not dismissing our context menu, right? We really should be doing that because the completed version of the project looks like this. When we long press on a message and we select that message, we dismiss the context menu and we had this beautiful, like list of reactions that have been added to that message. And so let's go ahead and handle that. The first thing we need to do is to add some sort of an untap handler to our reaction picker view. So I'm inside of our reaction picker view file right now, and I'm just going to go right ahead and create an untap handler. And the goal is just to have this untap handler fire whenever we select one of our individual buttons, because remember, each of these bad boys are actually buttons. And so I'm going to go ahead and just say, let's untap handler. And you already know it's going to be a closure. And I'm just going to go ahead and say, we have our selected emoji, which is going to be of type reaction. Remember, we created reaction in the last episode, which is just this enum that is the list of potential reaction for, that we can actually select. And we're going to go ahead and continue, and it's going to return a void. I believe that's the syntax that I'm looking for. And now with this untap handler or this closure, I'm going to actually go ahead and go into our reaction button. So our reaction button inside of this closure, I'm going to go ahead and fire the untap handler, and it's going to ask for the selected emoji, and it's just going to be item.reaction. Because remember, each of these emoji reaction structs have a reaction enum. And so with that being done, I think the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to guard against the more. So for example, in the completed version of the project, I'm not really handling the edge case of this plus icon. I'm just matching the design. So if you select the plus icon, nothing really happens. But if you select any of the other emojis, we actually had that emoji to the message. So I'm going to go ahead and guard against that. I'm going to say if item.reaction is not equals to more, else return out of the scope and do nothing. Okay, so now let's go fix our errors. The simulator is going to yell at us. Let us fix that. I mean, the preview. And this is an untap handler. I'm just going to use the trailing closure syntax. Okay. And the next thing I want us to do really quickly is to jump into our message list controller. So I'm just going to Command Shift and O as always, and just look for message list controller. This is just a quicker way to navigate your Xcode project. And so let's see where we're getting a bunch of these errors. We should be getting these errors inside of this method right here. Yep, that's what I assume. So this reaction picker view inside of our attach menu action items method, we need to go ahead and actually attach the trailing closure syntax to this bad boy, because remember, it's going to fire and return an emoji reaction for us. So I'm just going to say reaction in. And we can go ahead and print that reaction so that we see what we're dealing with. And I'm just going to go ahead and print reaction dot raw value or dot emoji. Actually, we have an emoji. So I'm just going to say reacted with, and let's go ahead and actually resume our SwiftUI preview. And let's, of course, check the preview console to make sure we are getting the right emoji that we selected on. So let's wait for the SwiftUI preview to do its thing. And let's long press a specific message. And when we do that, we get our beautiful reaction picker view. Let me drag this down a little bit more. And let's select the, heart emoji. And look at that. It says reacted with the heart. Let's select thumbs up. Perfect. So we're doing the right thing. So what happens if we select the plus icon? Nothing happens, which is exactly what we want. And obviously, as you saw in the completed version of the project, when we select each one of this individual emoji, we're actually supposed to dismiss the context menu, which is like the equivalent of tapping this blur view or tapping the actual, photo or the actual message itself. And so I'm going to go ahead and just dismiss the context menu. And remember, we have this dismiss context menu method right here. Right here, we have this dismiss context menu, which is exactly what it does, right? It closes our context menu for us. And so this is going to yell at us because we're inside of a closure. And because the message list controller is a class, we have to make sure we break, the retain cycle. And this is beyond the scope of this project, which is just automatic reference counts and memory management in iOS. But just remember, whenever we're doing weak stuff inside of some sort of a closure, we're just trying to prevent memory leaks. And so now let us go ahead and actually long press the message, and let us select an emoji. It should dismiss, the context menu. Oh, look at that, guys. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and select another one. That looks so beautiful, guys. Okay, so now let's jump into the core focus for today's episode. What do we want to focus on? Well, the first thing I want us to actually just focus on is talking about the data modeling for our message reaction. So I'm going to jump into my to-do file, and I've gone ahead and created this beautiful graphical, a representation of what our data model for our messages is going to look like. Right now, it looks something like this. We have our channel message node, we have our channel ID, and then we have our message ID. And the message ID, the value is key value pairs, and that's what we currently have right now, right? Well, for for our reactions, for us to store it in the backend, the way I'm going to do it, and again, this does not actually match what the WhatsApp version looks like, but this is just the way I'm doing it for time's sake. We're going to be adding 2 extra nodes to our channel messages, which makes sense, right? We're just going to append that information, that metadata, to our message node. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this reaction node and this user reaction node. So what's going on here? Well, the reaction node is actually a key value pair. As you can see, it's a map, a dictionary, as we call it in Swift. And the user reaction is also a map or dictionary, as we call it in Swift, right? And for the reactions, the key is just the emoji. And then the value is the emoji count. So if I jump into the completed version of our project, as you can see right here, we have this emoji count 2. We have 2. If we go ahead and react to this again, now we have 3. So this emoji count is really what's allowing us to know what is the total reaction for a specific message, right? That's the reactions node that's responsible for that. While the user reaction, this is exactly what's going to let us know what is the last emoji that the currently logged in user reacted to. So if I jump into the completed version of our project, let me expand out of Xcode really quickly. Exit out of Xcode. If I jump into the completed version of our project, when I long press on this message, you see we have the selected art icon, which lets us know that the art icon was the last emoji that we reacted with. What happens if I change it to the pray icon? Look at that, right? It increases the reaction count, which is just increasing the reactions, the emoji reaction inside of this node. And then if I go back and long press again, it lets us know that we reacted with the pray icon and the last emoji. And so that's something very simple. That's just the way I'm modeling the data. The reality is the way WhatsApp is actually doing the reaction is you can actually only set one reaction at a time. And so if you set one reaction, it's going to remove the old reaction that you set. But I'm not going to do that just for time's sake. And I think with the amount of Firebase logic that we have done so far, it's going to be pretty straightforward for you to be able to replicate that if that's what you're going for in your application. But so with that being done, or with that being said, let's go right ahead and actually try to create the Firebase query that's going to help us add this reactions and user reactions node to our channel messages. And by the way, guys, if you guys love this nice little graph that I did here, I can do a more detailed version of this for our entire application. So which is going to show like our users node, our messages node, our channels node, and everything. And maybe like with a addition of like some sort of a documentation that lets you know why I model the things the way they are. So I'm probably going to do that in some sort of a Patreon. Let me know in the comment section if this is something you would look forward to, or if this is something you're excited by. And if that's the case, I'm happy to do that. So let's jump back and continue our project. So I'm going to jump into our message service, and let's go right ahead and create a method that's going to be responsible for adding reaction to a message. So I'm just going to Command Shift and O, and I'm just going to say message service. Let's look for that bad boy. And I'm going to scroll all the way down here, and I think I'm just going to create an extension on our message service, or let's see, what do we have here? Yeah, this file is getting pretty beefy, but for time's sake, let's just go ahead and add it right below here. And I'm just going to create another static function. And this method is just going to be responsible for adding reaction. So I'm going to say add reaction to a message, right? And it's going to be of message item. And let's see, in channel, right? We need to know the channel that we're actually adding a message to. And what else do we want from current user? It's going to be of type user item. And I'm also going to pass in the reaction that we had in here at the beginning. So let's put a comma here, and this is going to be of type reaction. Remember, we have the reaction, which is just an enum. And after we are done, I'm going to return a completion, and it's going to be escaping because we're making a networking request. And let's see, the completion is going to give us what? Well, I wanted to return an emoji count, which is the latest emoji count, and int, which is just an integer, right? And that's pretty much our add reaction method. And this bad boy is pretty beefy, so I'm going to line break it. I'm going to put this in a new line and put this one in a new line and this in a new line as well. And the completion handler. Okay, so this add reaction to message in channel from current user method is going to be responsible for adding our reaction. And what do we need to do? Again, we're basically going for this data model. We need to have this reaction node and this user reaction node. So first off, we need to know which reaction we are increasing its counts. So we need to go and add that reactions count, increase that reactions count value. And the way to do this in Firebase is actually something called transaction. I don't even think it's specific to Firebase. This is just the way we increase counts in databases. We use transactions. So I'm going to go ahead and actually create a generic method called increase data transaction, increase counts via transaction. And this is going to be responsible for increasing the counts at a specific reference. And so this is going to be a database reference. And what else do I want? And the completion is going to be the new count. Completion is going to be the new count. I'm just going to say int, okay? And we're going to return a void. And honestly, I'm going to go ahead and make the closure optional, the completion handler optional. You don't necessarily need to call it if you don't want it. So what is this? This is yelling at me. What's going on? I probably need to add, what am I doing wrong here? Okay, I'm going to wrap both of this in an extra brackets. Yeah. Maybe the void instead? Yeah, I think it's the void. Just Swift syntax issues. And I think that looks pretty much like what we have in mind. All right, let's go ahead and actually, again, this method is going to be responsible for increasing this count. If I jump back to our to-do, so this is what's going to increase the 1 to 2 or 3 to 4. And this emojis 2 to 3 or whatever the new count is. So let's jump back to our message service and hacked and write the logic for this. And it's just going to be reference, which is, the path that we actually want to run it. I'm going to say run transaction. And the reason I'm making this into some sort of a reusable method is because we're actually going to be using this again for our channel badges. It's like the badge counts for a specific channel. So this is going to come in handy. So I'm just going to run transaction block and it's going to say current data. Let's see, I want current data. Am I actually doing the right thing? Run transaction block. Is that the one that we want? And completion endlet? No, that's not the one I want. I want to run this one, transaction block with mutable data. Yep. Okay, so we're going to have our current data. And what do we want to do? Well, I'm just going to say, let's see, reference the run transaction block. I'm just going to say if var count is equals to current data dot value as of type integer, else I'm going to say current data dot value is equals to 1. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm going into the specific child node and I'm saying, for example, for this reaction, if this reaction does not exist, if the reaction we're trying to increase its emoji counts does not exist, then we need to set the initial one as 1. That's really what's going on here. And then for this one, if that reaction already exists, obviously we want to say counts plus equals 1. We want to increment it by 1. And then I'm going to say the current data dot value is equals to my counts that I just created up here. And now we need to persist that transaction. So I'm going to say completion is going to be, let's see, current data dot value is going to be of type integer. And let's default it to 0. And of course, let us return and actually run our transaction results. So I'm going to say transaction results, the success, and it's going to say with value, and that is the current data. So this is just a way to increment counts in Firebase. You feel free to read up on the documentation, by the way, guys. And it's just a very neat little way that we're going to be reusing this method over and over again in other sort of batch counts. And so now let's jump into our add reaction method. Like I said, we need to do two things. We need to increment the reaction count, and we need to add the user reaction node. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this one. So for the reactions, let's see, which one do we want to add first? Reactions. I'm going to say increment emoji reactions counts. That's the first one. And the way we're going to just do this is we need to get, well, we have the current user information. So we're just going to say Firebase constants dot child, well, dot message ref, because remember, if I go back to the to-do, we're inside of our channel messages, which is just our message reference. This is not a new node. This is still part of the channel message node. It's just a sub node. We're just adding a sub node. This would be the equivalent of adding some sort of you could think of it as a column. And if you're coming from like the relational database world. And so then we have Firebase message ref and we have our child, and the child is going to be channel.id. Because again, remember in the to-do, we have our channel ID and then we need a message ID. And so the message ID is going to be our child, is going to be our message, which is right here, right, as a parameter, .id. And then I'm going to say .child. This is where we're going to go into the node called reactions. Because remember, if I jump back to our to-do again, we have this reactions node. And the reaction node is just going to be a dictionary. And the key is going to be the emoji reaction itself. And the value is going to be an integer. So perfect. So we have our reactions. And then I'm going to say the child is going to be our reaction.emoji, because that's just the key. And the value is going to be, let's see. Well, this is what we're going to run the database transaction on. So I'm going to say let reactions ref, because let me see if I can open these side by side. I think that's good. So that way we can see what we're dealing with. I just want to use this reaction path so you guys can see what we're trying to create. So we need this reaction reference for us to be able to call this increase, count via transaction method. So now with that, I'm just going to go ahead and just say increase count via transaction increase. I actually want to use the completion in this one, and I'm just going to say reaction reference, and the completion is going to be returning our new emoji count. And I'm going to jump into that closure. So now I'm going to do the second portion, which is this user reaction, right? I'm going to say add current user emoji to user reactions node. All right, so what do we need to do for this? Well, we're going to say Firebase constants again, Firebase constants, the child of, actually, it's basically just everything right here. Channel ID, message ID, all that good stuff. Boom, so we have our channel ID, a message ID. And what do we need? We need, so I'm going to inline, I'm going to create this in a new line, channel ID, message ID, and then we need a child called, let's just go ahead and copy this. We're calling it user reactions. Okay, that's the name of the node. And now we need our current user ID, because remember, look at the way I'm structuring it right here. We have a user ID, and then we have the actual emoji as a string. So it's essentially a key value pair of key is string, the value is also string. And so in this case, we have our user reaction. I'm going to say the child is going to be our current user, because remember, we're getting our current user from our parameter here, and the current user.uid, okay? And let's go ahead and set the value for this bad boy. And set value is going to be what? Reaction.emoji. Because remember, the reaction emoji, which is this computer property right here, that's a string, it's just a string, right? So this is what's going to allow us to set this user ID and then the emoji value. So I think that's pretty much all that we need, guys. And I'm going to go ahead and add a completion into this bad boy, and that's going to be it. So I'm just going to say completion. And the completion that we're going to return is just going to be our emoji count that we have here that we're getting from the increase from this method that increases our counts through transactions. And so let's go ahead and use this method inside of our chat room view model. And so I'm going to close this other panel, and I'm going to jump into our chat room view model. So that's right here, view models, open that in a new tab. Okay, so inside of our chat room view model, I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom. Again, we need to refactor our chat room view model, guys, but let's do that in some other episode. For now, I want us to create a method that is going to be responsible for using that message service method that we just created. And what's a good name to call this? I'm just going to call it add reaction, and that's going to be of type reaction to message, which is going to be of type message item. And I want to know the index at index, which is going to be an integer. And all these bad boys are going to do is just going to say message service dot add reaction, and we're going to pass in the reaction we're getting as a parameter. We're going to pass in the message we're reacting to. We're going to pass in the channel that is inside of our chat room view model, and we're going to pass in the current user that's inside of our chat room view model as well. We need to unwrap that bad boy though, because the current user is actually optional. So I'm going to say God let current user else return out of scope if that bad boy is not available. So then I'm going to hit the completion handler, and it's going to give us the emoji counts. So now we can go ahead and actually add a print statement here so we can see what we're actually dealing with. So I'm going to say reacted to message with, and I'm going to do the reaction dot emoji, and then I'm going to say count is, then I'm going to pass in the emoji counts. So let's go ahead and fire. Where do we need to call this chat room view model method? Well, pretty simply, inside of our message list controller, we're just going to use this add reaction method to trigger adding a reaction in our backend. And so let's jump into our message list controller inside of this method called attach menu action items. And I'm going to expand this a little bit more. As you can see, actually, let me go ahead and close the preview because we're not going to use the preview for this edge case or for the scenario. And as you can see, right as we're dismissing our context menu, right, we can just go right ahead and just call this view model method. So right here, I'm just going to say self, the view model, because remember, our message list controller have access to our view model. I don't know if you guys remember that. We created that a while ago, right here, right? We're injecting the view model, the instance of that view model into our message list controller. So right here, we could directly reference that method inside of our view model, and we can reference that method from our message list controller that exists in our view model. And since that method is not private, it's an internal method, we'll be able to do that. So let's go right ahead and just say view model dot add reaction, and it's going to say which reaction. Well, the reaction that we're getting back from our callback handler of our reaction picker view, and it's going to say which message, and the message that we have right here that we're getting as a parameter of this attach menu action items, and then it's going to ask for an index, and I don't think we have an index right here. And I think I'm just going to go right ahead and ask for, because I know this one has an index. Let me scroll all the way up here, guys. Yep. So we have an index path here. So we can just go ahead and pass in the index paths to this method as well, just to save us some time. Or we can honestly just calculate the index path on our own inside of the view model. So I think I'm going to remove this at index right here. I'm going to jump back to our chat room view model, and I'm going to remove this at index parameter. And let's go ahead and run our project on the simulator, and everything should be good to go. That way it would also validate that all the logic we just wrote is correct. So I'm getting a bunch of errors here, and yeah, this needs to be optional because remember we have a weak self here. And so let's go ahead and run our project again on a simulator, and let's go ahead and add a reaction to a message. And when we had a reaction, we should actually be able to validate that in our backend. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into a channel, right? And I'm going to go right ahead and react to this long message that we have here with the photo. And this is actually a super long message that I thought we didn't handle in the last episode, but we're actually handling that. Yeah, it still looks pretty decent. So let's go ahead and add an emoji to this bad boy. When we do that, look at that. It says reacted to message with hearts. The count is now 1. Let's go ahead and react with emoji, the heart emoji again. It should increase to 2. And look at that, the heart is now 2. So let's jump into our Firebase backend. Let's go into our channel messages, and let's see where we are actually reacting to a message. I'm not sure which channel is actually responsible. So I'm going to go right ahead and actually React again so I can see the node and see which channel ID I need to go into, which channel paths. So I'm going to React again, and it's this channel. So I'm going to jump into this channel, and I believe this is the last message, and it's a photo. Beautiful. Look at this, guys. Now we have 2 extra node inside of our messages ref. Because remember, we have our channel messages. This is our channel messages. This is a channel. We enter in that channel with the channel ID. This is a reaction. Look at that. We have the art emoji, and we have the number of counts for that emoji. And then if I scroll down a little bit, let me zoom out just a little bit, and you can see the reactions right here. We have the reaction, we have the currently logged in user, and the reaction that they have had it. And so it's just going to be like that. And let's go ahead and actually map that to our front end. The first thing I want us to the one thing I want us to do before we wrap up this episode pretty quickly, let us test it with different emojis just to make sure we're not overriding it. So let's add a thumbs up emoji. Let's jump out into our backend again. Look at that. We have the thumbs up. What if we had another thumbs up? And we jump to our backend again, we also have a thumbs up. What if we had, let's see, a prayer button, a prayer emoji, jump here, we have our prayer emoji. And look at that. You notice the user reaction changed from, hearts and thumbs up to pray. That's because I want us to use this user reaction to pre-select the last emoji that we selected. And so what I mean is in the completed version of the project, this circle right here, this selected emoji circle, is that user reaction data that we're going to be using to know which emoji the user last reacted with. And so now let's jump back into Xcode and let's continue with our focus. So with that being done, that means we're making progress. The one thing I want us to do really quickly is to add this selected emoji to our reaction picker view. So I'm going to jump into our reaction picker view, and I'm going to go ahead and add this circle right here. So as you can see, for example, if I had like the laugh emoji and I go back, we have that circular highlights around the laugh emoji. And so let's go ahead and build that, UI component. And I'm going to resume our SwiftUI preview again, wait for that bad boy. And let us scroll all the way down here. And what do we need to do, guys? Well, it's actually fairly simple. We just need to create some sort of I'm going to call it selected emoji indicator. I think that's a good name. Selected emoji indicator. And it's going to take in a reaction, which is going to be our emoji, or it's actually going to just be a reaction. And it's going to return us some view. All right. So our selected emoji is just going to be if you see in the completed version of the project, honestly, it's just a color. That's it, right? It's just a color. And we're just going to go right ahead and do that. So I'm going to use system gray. I'm just going to say color, the system gray. And I think system gray 5 is a good color. And I'm going to give it a frame and width. And the width is going to be 45. The height is going to be 45. And I'm going to give it a clip shape of circle. And now, where do we want to add the selected emoji indicator? Well, we just want to add it on top, or actually we want to add it as a background on our button body. And honestly, this is a pretty bad name. I don't know why we call the button body. Well, by we, I mean me. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this to emoji button. I think that's a better name. Okay. And I'm going to take this and paste it into our view body as emoji button, into our reaction button. Wait, actually, now I'm confused. Oh, never mind. Okay, yeah, let's call it button body. I see what I was doing there. So I basically split the reaction button. I split the button body out of the reaction button. Okay, that's okay. Yep. So inside of the button body, let's go ahead and actually just add a background, because this is the actual emoji. Remember, this is the plus image, which is right here. Each of these actual emojis right here. And all we're going to do right here is just say background. And we could just say something like, for example, color the red. Let's see what that looks like. So it gives us the red background. But we already created the selected emoji button. So I'm just going to say selected emoji indicator. It's going to ask for a reaction. And the reaction is just going to be item.reaction. And let's see what that looks like. Look at that. So right now we have these 3, every single one of them have a circle. And obviously that's not what we want, right? The obvious reaction is we want the selected emoji. And actually, let me move it. I'm going to move this method down right below our button body. And obviously what I was going to say is we want this to be optional. We only want this to show up if the current user, if that was the last emoji that the current user selected or used to react to that specific message, not just selected in general, but for that specific message. And here's what I mean, right? And so for this was the last emoji that I reacted with this video call message. But for this one, this was the last emoji that I reacted with. And if I change this to thumbs up and I go here, you notice it's still, this one is for the specific message. And now it's thumbs up for the specific message. So it's basically the last emoji that you reacted with for a specific message. So we need a way to know that. We need a way to know, what is the current user emoji for that specific message. And it's going to be pretty simple, guys. And we're going to just need to use the data that we store in the backend to figure that out. But I think this episode is already getting a little bit longer than I want it to be. So in the next episode, we're actually going to handle this final UI elements. And also we're going to add this bad boy right here, the actual, for example, when we actually react, let me jump into the current state of our project. So when we actually react to a message, I would like for us to actually add that nice emoji reaction to the bottom of the message. So it should be attached to the bottom of the message. And so that's it for this episode, guys. Thank you for watching as always. Appreciate the support, and I'll see you guys in the next one where we're going to continue right from here. Peace.